Imagine this. You've been sitting with silence, days, maybe weeks of unanswered texts, no calls, just emptiness, and then, out of nowhere, your phone lights up. It's him, a message, maybe a casual hey, maybe something more layered like I've been thinking about you. In that instant, your body reacts before your mind can catch up. Your heart skips, your breath shortens, the swirl of emotion is intense, and your first instinct is to respond quickly. But here's what I want you to consider. The space between receiving his message and sending your response is the most powerful territory you possess. That moment is the doorway to either reclaiming your self-respect or unconsciously giving it away. Because how you respond, or if you respond at all, should not be determined by the shock of his return, but by the clarity you've developed in his absence. Most people react, they don't respond. Reacting is emotional, unconscious, impulsive. It's the muscle memory of longing. Responding is conscious, it's thoughtful, it asks, what serves me here? Before you type a single word, you need to pause, not out of manipulation, not to play hard to get, but because you are worth a considered response. Let's be brutally honest. When someone who disappeared reappears, it triggers all the unresolved questions. Was it something I did? Did he care at all? Is he back because he misses me? Or just because he's lonely? You start trying to make sense of it. That overanalysis is your mind's way of coping with the uncertainty and pain of being left in the dark. But you don't need to make sense of him. You need to make sense of you. And here's where psychological depth comes in. When someone leaves without explanation, your nervous system registers it as a rupture. Silence from someone you're emotionally attached to is a form of psychological ambiguity, one of the most distressing states for the human brain. Your mind scrambles to fill in the gaps. It builds narratives to reduce discomfort, even if those narratives are false. That's why the moment he returns, it can feel like relief, like resolution, but it's not resolution. It's a reprieve from anxiety, a chemical drop of dopamine that tricks you into thinking something meaningful has occurred. But nothing has changed yet. Nothing has been explained. Philosophically, this is about power, not dominance, not control, but the kind of power that comes from presence of mind. Most people give away their power not when they're being mistreated, but when they abandon themselves to the hope of being chosen again. You become reactive, seeking closure or connection without asking the deeper question. Do I even want to reopen this door? This is where your pause becomes transformational, because it's in that pause that you ask the tough but necessary questions. What did his silence cost me? Did I heal anything in his absence, or did I wait, quietly shrinking while hoping he would return? Am I about to undo weeks of progress with one emotionally charged reply? That pause creates a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap is your freedom, your clarity, the chance to act from wisdom instead of need. When you pause, you shift the power dynamic, not as a tactic, but as an act of self-alignment. You're not chasing, you're choosing. You're deciding whether this person has earned access to your emotional energy again. And let's be real, not everyone deserves a second conversation just because they sent a first message. Silence followed by sudden attention doesn't equate to respect. Words must be weighed, not just received. This is not about being cold or vindictive. It's about protecting your peace, because peace isn't just the absence of chaos, it's the presence of standards. And those standards are upheld, not when things are going well, but when they are being tested. So the next time he reaches out after silence, don't see it as a romantic moment. See it as a moment of truth, a test of how deeply you've come to value yourself in his absence. Pause. Reflect and ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to in me? Because the most powerful response might not be what you say to him. It might be what you finally say to yourself. Never let the return of someone else become the exit from your own growth. So, let's say you've taken that pause. You've given yourself space, breathed through the initial emotional surge, and now you're standing at the crossroads. The question isn't just should I respond? It's deeper. It's what does his return actually mean? Because the moment someone reappears after silence, we tend to assign meaning that isn't there. We romanticize the return, we fill in the gaps with hope, but hope without evidence is a dangerous thing to build your decisions on. The truth is, not every message from the past is a sign of transformation. Sometimes it's a symptom of boredom. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's just convenience. And if we don't pause to evaluate intent, we risk stepping back into a dynamic that wasn't serving us to begin with. Here's where clarity must become your compass. When someone returns, especially after closing door, the first thing you must look at isn't what they say, it's what they show. It's easy to send a miss you text. It costs nothing. It requires zero vulnerability, zero accountability, but transformation. The kind that deserves your attention always brings clarity. It brings explanation. It brings a willingness to own the silence. Ask yourself, has this person taken responsibility for their absence, or are they just resuming the conversation as if nothing happened? Because someone who truly respects you won't gloss over their disappearance. They'll address it. They'll make you feel safe by confronting what they did, not bypassing it. There's a psychological concept called intermittent reinforcement. It's what makes slot machines addictive. You don't know when the reward is coming, but when it does, it gives you just enough dopamine to keep playing. Some people create this dynamic in relationships, disappear, reappear, offer just enough affection to hook you back in. And you confuse that pattern for passion, for something real. But inconsistency isn't romance, it's emotional volatility dressed up as chemistry. So how do you spot the difference? Look at patterns, not moments. One sweet message doesn't erase a history of avoidance. One emotional confession doesn't mean consistent effort will follow. If someone has a habit of leaving and returning, they're showing you who they are, not who they could be, but who they consistently are. And who someone is consistently is who you're actually in a relationship with, not their potential. This is where philosophical honesty comes in. Most of us don't get stuck in bad relationships. We get stuck in promises of potential. We stay for what we want it to be, rather than seeing it for what it is. But if your happiness is always located in the future version of someone, then you're not in love with them. You're in love with your projection of them. So when he comes back, you need to ask, is he offering durariance, CONN, or just temporary comfort? Has he done any internal work? Or is this just his cycle, pull away when things get real, return when things get lonely? Because here's the hard truth. When someone disappears without explanation, they're telling you something. And when they come back without accountability, they're confirming it. Now, does this mean people can't change? Of course not, but change reveals itself through consistency, not grand gestures. You want to look for alignment between words and actions. If he says he values you, what has he done to show it? If he claims to regret the silence, what is he willing to do to rebuild trust? A healthy reconnection doesn't skip steps. It doesn't expect immediate forgiveness or access. It moves slowly, intentionally, It respects the damage done and works to repair it. Anything less is not love. It's convenience dressed up as sentiment. And here's something crucial. Your desire for closure or clarity should never override your standards. Just because you want answers doesn't mean you have to accept vague ones. You don't owe someone the benefit of the doubt just because they returned. You owe yourself the benefit of discernment. So when that message arrives, instead of jumping into analysis mode or fantasy, ask yourself this: what has actually changed? What's different now? About him, about me, about what I will and won't accept. Because if nothing's changed, nothing's changed. And you're not obligated to revisit a chapter that hurt you just because the other person finally decided to reopen the book. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect isn't walking away in anger. It's refusing to re-enter a cycle that no longer fits who you're becoming. Don't mistake someone's return as proof they've grown. Look for the evidence, and if it's not there, let their absence continue to speak louder than their words ever could. So you've paused, you've evaluated, you've taken that sacred space to reflect, to assess the pattern, to observe the reality rather than chase the fantasy. And now you're standing at the point where most people get stuck, the response, not the message itself, but the energy behind it. Because how you choose to respond, whether you speak, stay silent, set a boundary, or extend grace, says more about your self-worth than it ever says about him. Let's be clear, your response is not about getting him to see your value. It's about you embodying it. It's not about proving something to him. It's about affirming something within you. Here's the trap people fall into. They think if they respond perfectly, calmly, confidently, not too eager, just mysterious enough, maybe this time it'll stick. Maybe this time he'll see what he missed. But let's go deeper. What's really happening in that moment? You're still operating from fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of closing a door that feels like the only source of hope. And fear-based responses never come from power. They come from lack, from the illusion that your happiness hinges on someone else's ability to choose you. But when you truly believe in your value, your response shifts. You're not trying to curate it for effect. You're not performing worth, you're just living it. And that means your response becomes a reflection of your internal reality, not your external hopes. Psychologically, this is about attachment regulation. When you're anxiously attached, or even just emotionally invested in someone inconsistent, your instinct is to repair the connection as quickly as possible. Silence feels like a rupture, and any contact feels like a lifeline, so you reach, you explain, you forgive too fast. You reattach before safety has even been reestablished. But this is exactly where emotional maturity needs to interrupt the impulse. Philosophically, this comes down to a single question. Are you choosing from love or from lack? Love of self, love of peace, love of clarity. That produces boundaries. That produces thoughtful dialogue, or sometimes silence. But when you respond from lack, you're grasping. You're looking for reassurance rather than resolution, and often you sacrifice your dignity to get it. Now, I'm not saying don't respond at all. I'm saying your response should come from a place of inner congruence. If you respond, let it be because you want to, not because you need to. Let it be because it aligns with your values, not because you're trying to revive a fantasy. You're not chasing validation, you're owning your voice and your choice. And sometimes the most powerful response isn't a witty message or a confident boundary. It's not responding at all. Because silence, when it comes from strength, communicates a depth of self-respect that no carefully crafted text ever could. It says, I've outgrown this dynamic. I don't need to prove anything. I'm not angry. I'm just unavailable for the version of love that made me question my worth. Let's not confuse strength with cruelty. This isn't about punishing someone for disappearing. It's about protecting the progress you've made in their absence. You didn't spend all that time healing just to undo it with one emotionally loaded reply. When you respond from fear, you shrink. You go back to managing their emotions, tiptoeing around truth, minimizing your needs. But when you respond from strength, you expand. You say what's real. You hold your standards even if it costs you the connection. That's not weakness. That's emotional sovereignty. You want to know what really makes someone sit up and notice your value. It's not the cleverness of your message. It's not how chill or cool you seem about the whole thing. It's the fact that you're not available in the same way anymore. That the version of you who tolerated breadcrumbs isn't the one answering the door now. So whether you send a message, set a boundary, or say nothing at all, let it be a decision that's loyal to your growth, not your grief. This is the part most people miss. Responding well isn't about getting him back. It's about not losing yourself again. Because here's the thing, every time you choose strength over fear, clarity over fantasy, dignity over desperation, you build a life that gets harder and harder for the wrong people to access. And that's not just healing, that's transformation.